then we do find these very mystical aspects of Tsongkhapa's life where he's experiencing these visions of Manjushri, to the point where his relationship, if we are to believe the biographies written around it, by some of his students, his immediate students, as well as some of his contemporaries, talk about him having almost a kind of an ongoing day-to-day kind of a tutor-pupil relationship with this, extra-human figure, Manjushri. And Tsongkhapa's own writings also explicitly speak about the experience, when he's writing to his teacher or when he's writing to some of his close colleagues. So he also acknowledges, and in many of his writings, in the salutation, he refers specifically to Manjushri when he pays homage, Guru Manjushri. So, using the epithet Guru, teacher. So clearly, it was a reality in his life. Now, of course, from a purely secular perspective, what exactly is the nature of that reality? What exactly is that phenomenon is very difficult to articulate. But the fact is, it was a felt reality in his life. That is a fact which he himself acknowledges, as well as his contemporary scholars and biographers. So then the question is, if he, as a philosopher, who believes in the ability of human thought to reason, apply the discipline, and then he takes very seriously Nagarjuna and Chandrakriti, sort of approach, where, he believes that human thought has the potential to be able to take us to the revelation of the truth, ultimate nature of reality. The thought may not fully capture or represent what that ultimate nature is, but it can take us, take us there. So if that is the case, then how does he himself view and use the authority of this teacher, this guru, this mystical presence in his life? Interestingly, Tsongkhapa almost never actually cites the authority of Manjushri as a way of making a point, as a way of substantiating a position that he's holding. That's very interesting. So in that sense, he's not using this experience that he has and whatever revelations that he's experiencing as a way of stating the truth, as it were. So in that case, the relationship with that authority voice seems to be quite different from a typical relationship we will find in a big general religious tradition where scripture is accorded such an authority because it's a revelation. So it doesn't, but on the other hand, he does take it very seriously. And if you look at at what points in his development, spiritual development, or personal practice development, there is a kind of a direct interaction with this mysterious presence. Now we know from the biography that when he first got introduced, it was through a medium by the name of Umapa, and Tsongkhapa was in his late 20s, and it was a medium, and the medium approached Tsongkhapa's own students to seek meeting with Tsongkhapa, saying that he himself had a revelation and instructing him to meet with Tsongkhapa. So at the initial stage, the communication was really through this medium. So one could imagine it probably what is happening here. Now, this is my guess, is that, once in a while when they're in a session, probably the medium is going into some kind of trance. And then in that tranced state, communication is taking place. But in any case, the initial stage of that relationship was primarily through the medium of Umapa. And then a high point of that was Tsongkhapa spent some time in Lhasa with the mystic just before the mystic returned to his home in eastern Tibet. So they chose to spend some time together. They stayed in the same place, 2 separate meditation rooms, but they shared their breakfast and lunch. And as observant monastics, they did not eat supper. So, and the biography tells us that it was during some of these tea sessions when they were having that there would be spontaneous, communication. And so it seems, but in those early stages, it was really Tsongkhapa asking many, questions on many important points that he's kind of, contemplating or struggling, whether it has to do with, and some of the key aspects are really to do with Nagarjuna's philosophy of emptiness. And Tsongkhapa really wanted to get to the bottom of it, because on the surface, Nagarjuna's teaching can be read as nihilistic. Everything is empty. There is nothing that has objective reality. And then how do you square that with, emphasis on observance of, moral codes? How do you distinguish between right and wrong if you don't have, no facts of the world grounds the moral laws? Similarly, how do you ground the facts of the world that seems to be regulated and has cause and effect, causal relationship, and law of the causality obeys? When you touch fire, it burns. When you drink water, it quenches your thirst. So how do you actually account for that kind of regularity that we preserve? And also we intersubjectively. It's not just a single person's viewpoint. Just as I experience the world in a particular way, broadly, many fellow human beings experience in the same way, given the biological constitution of our body. And particularly on the emotion domain, Buddhism is very universalist. Buddhism believes there are certain fundamental human, basic emotions, kind of common to all sentient beings, living beings, that have the capacity to experience pain and pleasure. And then furthermore, higher levels of emotions will be universal to humans, given our social reality and all of this. So Tsongkhapa really wants to have an integrated way of seeing the world, where you don't compartmentalize. This is what has happened sometimes historically in the Buddhist world. When it comes to ultimate nature of reality, you go with Nagarjuna. When it comes to meditation practices, you go with Yogacara. When it comes to epistemological thinking, you go with Dharmakirti and Dignog. When it comes to talking about the physical world, you go with Abhidharma, psychology, Abhidharma. So, and that's actually, in some ways, it's okay. And it's quite a simple approach, because you sort of compartmentalize. But Tsongkhapa was a real philosopher. Yes, some of these sources have their strengths in particular domain, but as a human being who's living this life as an integrated person, the world is not divided in those terms. Our thought requires that kind of division to make sense of the reality, but the reality is just one. So how do you reflect that in the way in which you understand the world in an integrated way? And this is what makes Tsongkhapa very impressive, because his quest is very thorough, very methodical, very patient, never rushing to jump to conclusion. And whenever he had doubts, he stayed with the doubts. So in the early stages, the Manjushri's role seemed to be almost like a kind of a sounding board for Tsongkhapa's kind of, going through these processes.